Welcome back to another episode here on the Heart and Hustle podcast with our next guest that says, I walked out of a high paying engineering job so I could adopt a child. I didn't know then that God used that decision to teach me how to build things that last. Ministries, not just moments. Darren, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
Man, it's a pleasure to have you here as well, man. Let's talk about it. You spent nearly 2 decades as an engineer in manufacturing. What patterns, discipline, and perspective did you bring from life into that nonprofit work? Because I always feel like life teaches you things and prepare you for the next chapter, and then you walk into a next chapter. How will you prepare for that moment?
Well, I think overall, I mean, I came out of school, as an engineer, as you said there, and I was aggressive and focused on career, but I think along the way, you're learning things. I became a leader in the technical fields at a pretty young age, under 30. I had quite a staff of people, and so I was learning, along the way. And when you're in that kind of a situation, a lot of times the people that were around me were older and older than I was, and yet you had to still kind of, show them that you were relevant to be their leader, because that's not always an easy thing. And so, I really learned to appreciate people and how to work with, people of all ages and in that kind of a situation. And then the engineering discipline itself, it's a lot of times very project driven and goal driven. And as I moved into my years where I started to look into the calling that was before me in terms of ministry, I think a lot of those skills and seeing like other nonprofits operate where people came in strictly from their passion and from their heart, they lacked some of those skills to kind of get things done. And a lot of times the donors of an organization, they want to be confident that the organization's actually going to do what they're providing funding for. And I think a lot of that combination of understanding what a donor's perspective is from a working world, and I don't have time to be in this, but I'm passionate about what you do. I think understanding that side of things helped me to make sure that what we were doing at Orphan Care Alliance was accomplishing a mission, a goal that donors would see and that it was tangible to them. So I think a lot of that kind of preparation came from my working career in engineering and management.
I love that, man. And before you even get into the space, you're already volunteering like 25 hours a week, you mentioned. What was
Well,
happening over that time? Go ahead.
well, yeah, it was meant to be just this. I was volunteering in other, parts of our church ministries and stuff, but nothing significant. A little bit, just smaller. And then there was this point in time around 2007 or 8 where my wife and I wanted to volunteer a few hours a week together. That's what it was going to look like, was a few hours a week, and we would do that together since I already had this full-time job and you're with family. And then it just seemed like I was without her again if I went off and did some volunteering on my own, and we had a passion to do that together. Well, so it did look like that, right? From 2008 at the end of it into 2009, it looked like we were both volunteering a few hours a week. But quickly we were asked, if we would coordinate, this kind of a grassroots effort of a ministry around foster care and adoption in Kentucky. And so we did. We just kind of started a little bit, but, a little bit grew and grew and grew to the point that, over the course of, say, 5 years, I found this significant challenge of this thing's now wanting 15, 20 hours a week or more. And I'm still working full time, and we have a family, and my wife at this point, is already, we had secured a space to operate out of, and she's now in there as a volunteer, probably 15, 20 hours a week. And it became a significant part of what we did. So that's how it happened. Wasn't the plan, but it seemed to be where we were. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of
And then
how
you
it
get into
happened.
another. Yeah, and then you get to another space, adoption, which wasn't just a personal decision. Really became the hinge of your career pivot, I
Well,
believe.
yeah, yeah.
Can you tell us how taking in Andrew into your family changed what you believed you were really capable of? 'Cause I think that's also the big change for you that realized,
It
wait, there's
was.
so much more to life.
It was. And after, and after I don't know that I so much realized that until maybe after the last time we talked. I was looking through the notes of that, and it really was a hinge point. I don't know if I ever looked at it that way before. But we adopted Andrew. We started the journey in 2003, which was the year he was born, and then we brought him into our home in 2004. And at the beginning, it just seemed like it was rounding out our family and our call to be have more than one child, because we already had our daughter. And so it just seemed like that. It seemed simple at that point, but I think as Andrew, we were raising Andrew, and we knew that we had some of our own challenges with raising a child from an adoption situation, and it just was different than raising our biological child. And so we started to reach out, and we got connected with some of these people, and then that evolved over the course of that time to, oh, this is like a ministry, that needs to be out there. And I think the more that we saw the challenges and other people's challenges, and then had our eyes open to the foster care system and some of those things just by being in this crowd, that's what started to really drive the passion of growing OCA, on a personal level for my wife and I. And when it's like we hung this shingle of, hey, we're a nonprofit in 2009, and the amount of people coming to us was almost at some points overwhelming, and just seeing that cause. And so it became this driver for both her and I, about what we were doing every day, and just how many people needed help, and then the situations that children and families were in, and that's what was fueling everything for us. That's the
Yeah.
it became a heart issue, for me, for especially, and for her too, but for me it was especially difficult, or a bigger transition, I'll say. I had much more of a left brain, factual, black and white kind of a mindset, from 2000 and prior. And, Andrew and the cause of these children turned it much more into a heart issue. And I found a passion there about that I probably didn't know I had. And it certainly was exposed, and then I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't let it go. So, it's kind of how we got to where we are, I think. So.
And as I told you when I spoke to you last time, it's so cool that you were able to adopt. I mean, there's more. I actually spoke to a leader, and he mentioned there was more than 500,000 kids in the foster system, right? Like,
Correct.
you were able to be a small part of that, and you will continue to just give. You're in the space of giving back, allowing others to realize, as you mentioned, the testimony. The best thing I heard, actually, Darren, when we talk about testimony, someone says God would put you through a test to give a testimony. And you went through that test, right? And now you can tell the testimony, and your son is that living testimony. Everything that you poured into him, and raising him as your own, that is not an easy challenge, right? And you've kind of mentioned that, but you've done so amazing at it. So, and then every time I talk to you, you're like, yeah, I'm taking him, doing music. You're still so supportive, and you can tell he's really appreciative of that. What are some of the things that you kind of went through that you didn't expect going through as an adopted parent?
Well, I mean, so they, boy, that's a good question, and I just gotta start well. But I think most families will come into it thinking they're simply adding another child to their family, and you are, and not every adoption is the same or goes the same, and just like every child's different. But I think for the most part, you walk in and you think that you're going to be able to be the same parent to these children as you were to maybe other children that you have or seen. But a lot of times they're operating from a mindset, and it's instilled well before they're aware of it. But they have a natural mindset of lack of trust and lack of connection, and when you don't have that, you can't parent the same way that you parent a child that's just born. When your family has a child biologically, there's a connection there that's spiritual and that we don't all understand. And when that is not the case, you've got to build a trust a layer before you can do anything to progress with a child. And so our challenges were generally we didn't have that trust, and as Andrew became into the ages of 3 to 7, his behaviors and his actions, what was behind that was a lack of trust and a lack of relationship to us and a lack of connection. And we had to do a lot of work and a lot of training and a lot of understanding in trauma, which is why my wife and I both train in trauma now. But we had to do a lot of understanding to be able to get Andrew connected to us. And it's just a lot of differences. And people come and they hope that you can just fix their child, so to speak. And it's really fixing the parents to understand the child. And so much of what we do at OCA is really first helping people to realize you've got to build trust with these kids of all ages. It doesn't matter if they're 20 or if they're 6. You've got to build trust with them before you're going to go anywhere. And then it's about a genuine relationship to grow them from there. It's genuine relationship. It's not, conditional. It's living through all of the things that they're going to do wrong. It's not, as long as you keep this job, we'll keep being able to be together, or it can't be, oh, I'm getting paid to be with you. They read through all that. That's not a genuine relationship to them. And so we work at helping people establish that genuine relationship that can grow these kids beyond the trauma that they've experienced.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you talk about adoption, man. Like, I love how you just mentioned that it wasn't just the child that needed the assistance; it was more of the parent having to deal with those situations, right? Because and you kind of mentioned the whole money factor. It just really brings something in my head where I was raised by a mom that had 7 kids. She had 4 of her own, and she took in 3 from her sister. So it was really my aunt that raised me. Mm-hmm. But I would always remember her own kids that I call my brothers now saying, you were adopted for the money, or you picked up off the street. And those are the things that scarred me, that I still remembered. Mm-hmm. And I addressed to my brother when I was 30-something years old and allowing him to know how that hurt me. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times when we, like, as someone that has been adopted, we hold so much... just so much hurt within us, and we don't really talk about it, and luckily at 30 years old, I was able to see, a therapist and able to really talk through some of these things that I had to encounter, but it really happens on both ends, right? Because when I went back to my mom and finally addressed some of the things I was holding on for all these years, she said, hey, I'm so sorry. I did the best I could with what I knew. And that's what you're saying is like, hey, I wanted to know as much as possible to do the best possible. And was I perfect? Not at all, because none of us were, but you did the best you could and still doing the best you could, right? And I love that. Not a lot of people have that same mindset, and I'm happy that you're in this space. I mean, you're probably seeing it more than ever, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do. And, to your point there, it is. I mean, one day, Andrew's story is a little different than yours, but, he has the situation where he never knew his biological parents. And so, one day, after a really bad argument, I'll call it, he's in his late teens, and he goes, I'm angry at my dad, and I take it out on you. That was the why behind a lot of the behavior, but he was finally able to communicate it, and he was sorry about it, but he said that's a truth, for him. And so, I think just realizing it and helping him talk through it, it's it's been healing for him. To your point, like when you said you were able to talk to your brother, it's a healing moment, and you've got it. You're dredging it way out of the deep hurts that you have, and sometimes you can't even vocalize them. And I think that's what happens with kids that are, somewhere between 7 and 12. They're going through all this change. They're having these feelings. It's deep hurt inside, and they can't even identify it to be able to communicate it. And I think it makes it hard. And so then it's a patience on the parent side. It's a patience, and it's a knowing there's a why behind the behavior, but helping to excavate that from deep within, is hard. So.
Yeah, kudos to you. Everything that you're mentioning is like, I didn't know at the moment I was dealing with some of these things, but I remember, the acting out, misbehaving, and it wasn't who I was. It was what was happening to me. Right. I felt the
Right.
not feeling loved. I felt like I wasn't seen, because I did feel the difference, and you just made sure that wasn't the case, and you're still making sure that's not the case, not just for your own kids, but for other kids. Talk about some of the things that you're doing at the organization level to really help some of these families.
Yeah, so I mean, we really have three, major areas that we try to help in. One is sort of what we've been talking about, and it was where we started. It was really being a support to families that chose adoption. Then the next thing that we sort of evolved into was the kids that are in care that weren't adopted, that were maybe in the foster system. And while we help a little bit more financially with international adoption, and so the families at Kentucky that chose international adoption, and we were able to help them. But we moved, when we moved into the kids, it was more about the kids within Kentucky's foster care system. And so we the big thing we do is to try and provide life coaches to those families, and or to those kids, because a lot of times, it seems like not a lot, and we sometimes can only get to be where we have an hour or so a week with them. It can be extended into a little bit more, but that is the 1 hour a week that they look forward to, and the 1 hour a week where they know somebody is there who just appreciates and wants a relationship with them, and not, somebody else who might be a psychologist or a doctor or those kinds of people that are around you in more of that institutional kind of setting, or even if it's with a family, maybe it's a foster child in a family. Those opportunities actually allow a little bit of respite time for the foster family while they're with their life coach, And we don't use mentor, the word mentor, so much to describe our life coaches, because we really want it to be more about just doing life together than somebody who is in a position of, well, I'm helping you, I'm guiding you. I mean, it does become that, but it only becomes that after there's a trust in a relationship, right? So I think we work that's our second area. Third area that we evolved into is sort of a family preservation. So we have about 90 families. Well, before I jump to that, but the life coaching side, we are working with 40 to 50 kids right now, and we could have 20 more if we had enough life coaches. I mean, it's really just always trying to recruit life coaches into this world of walking with kids. So part of it is the difficulty is just not understanding that they're out there, because they're kind of hidden in plain sight in the United States. They're at places that have, fluffy names and all of that, but they're really institutional living. And part of it is just, for people to understand how they approach them and not put on that, initial label of these are bad kids. They're not bad kids. They're kids who have deep hurt and they're acting out. And so trying to help people understand that. And then this third place of ministry is really with the struggling parents, a lot of times moms, most of the time, sometimes a family, but just helping them to get stability in their life with helps and things we can bring to them while we're kind of managing a case with them, so that they get stability in the state's not always knocking at their door to take their children away. Because a lot of times it is loving parents who just don't have the means in some way or another. And so that creates situations, and that's where we're especially effective. I mean, by all means, we don't have a staff of professionals that are there. We have a staff of people who are passionate about growing trust in a relationship with a family to help them, So we come at it from that side of things. But that's the three main areas, and we're serving about 90 families right now this year that are just these struggling families trying to help them keep their kids and provide and do the best they can with them and for them. So
You're saying some really good stuff, man, that I could really relate to, and it's the sense of one, trusting someone, and having someone in your life that really believes in you. And
yeah,
it just means so much when
right.
one person sees the good in you,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that person is what usually kind of plants that seed for you. Someone asked me, Efrain, your mom had 10 kids, your father had 8 kids, they only have one together. What makes you that special one? And my response was, obviously, God really blessed me with great people in my life that allowed me that loved me more at times than I loved myself. That seen the good in
yeah,
me before I
yeah,
seen the good in myself, right? And it's what you're doing is that life coach that sees good in these
right,
kids, and they're not seeing them for the problem that they're causing,
right,
realizing that there's so much hurt in there,
right, right,
and we can catch at an early age. As these kids start to age out, they start to find the right path in life. You
right,
know what I mean?
right.
Because I've seen it, I witnessed it, where kids didn't have that preparation, so then they go out into the world and they're lost, and they don't have that family, and they feel alone, and
Yeah,
and that's what the drugs, and that's where all these things really start to happen. So I love that you
yeah.
guys are really knocking this out at an early age,
Well,
and
I mean,
and I love that life really led you here.
what's that? You like what?
I, I love that that God led you
Oh,
here. The
yeah,
life
yeah.
led you to this
Thanks.
moment to be able to help and have these
Well, I
conversations.
mean, to your point there, that one of the common statistics is that 75% of kids that come out of foster care end up, homeless, in prison, or they pass, through bad choices or whatever that looks like. And, so a lot of times, prison ministries, if you ask somebody who works in prison ministry, they will tell you that a huge percentage of those men or women in prison ministry came out of foster care, and so it's just where we are in the stream of trying to prevent. We'd love to put prison ministry out of business, by helping kids in foster care not have that part as part of their path, and so it is true, and I think to your other point, sometimes it's not sometimes, especially for the kids that are in foster care, the ones that have been successful, and you said it, they will point to 3 or so significant people that were in their lives at the right time in the right place that made a huge impact and shaped their perspective, either of themselves or what they were capable of or something that was there, and they might be the most unsuspecting people. One of the guys that I know will name his 3rd grade teacher that brought him in after school, not for detention, but to give him an apple because she knew he was going hungry, and sit and talk with him while he ate the apple. He will name that person as one of the most significant people in his trajectory in life. Other people would just name people that they bumped into somewhere, and they took in interest, and they had conversation, and they maybe met sometimes, and they maybe were only there 6 months or a year, but they were influential enough at that point that they changed a trajectory. So I mean, it certainly
Yeah.
happens that way. So I think people too, like especially in the life coach world, they underestimate their impact on a youth. It's I've heard somebody out there say, who was a foster kid at one point, it's not how much time you have, it's what you do with that time, and so it being high value, high impact time is what's important. So I think it just kind of
I
substantiates
love it.
or emphasizes some of the things you mentioned.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the podcast, we first want to say thank you. And we also just want to give you a little insight of what we're up to at Francis. Some don't even realize that we're working with organizations to help them use AI to create that real human communication experiences, whether that's actually supporting your families, those patients, or the entire community. We're actually creating tech that connects. Check it out, francis.ai. Yeah, man, you've been doing some tremendous work around this space, and that's just so cool to always talk to someone that's in this space. And you supported over, I believe, if the last time we mentioned, over 300 adoptions.
Right.
What's that one story that still stops you? One child, one family you can't forget, and the why behind it?
Oh boy, I'd have to think there a little bit. Yeah,
I can imagine there's plenty.
what's that? Yeah,
Many to choose
there are
from.
plenty. I mean, we see them, and it's like sometimes you get them in snapshots. I think it's some of the ones that are probably most special are the ones that had odds, so many odds stacked against them, or the situation seemed impossible from an adoption standpoint, and you're able to help them, work through it, and you see them 5 or 6 years later because people don't come to you necessarily routinely when there's not a problem. It's really when they're in a heated moment or a situation that was very difficult. But to see some of these families where you've either helped them with resources or you've walked them through. I'm trying to think of one. I know of one. Where there's a lot of difficulty in the family. There was just it was dangerous in the house at times, and it was very difficult to hold on. And today, there's a successful college graduation by this young man. He's starting up his own business, and he's thriving. That's one of them that I can think of right off the top of my head. Um, Sometimes we've been able to help families. There was somebody who came to us who was an aunt raising a child, but the child was very young and concerned about her ability to raise this child through their childhood, and working with attorneys and others to be able to bring a family that was looking to adopt, where this young girl was able to move into that family but still have a relationship with the aunt, and be raised in a way that was, maybe not the traditional family, but it kept her connected to her biological roots while she was in a place that could raise her into, her young adulthood. Things like that have happened, and it's very rewarding when you can see a path kind of come together when it looks like there's nothing, and how God got them to our door or whatever is always not, understood. We have a meeting next Friday with a similar situation, a younger adoptive child, and one that maybe not able to live on their own, and they're looking for answers. What are their options? What can we do? Because we want this child to be, cared for, but we're not sure that we're going to be here as she has her needs into the future, that kind of stuff. So, where we're able to provide answers and be connected, it's not always us alone who are doing that answer, but it's knowing and the people in the network of people that we work with, and who can come into these situations and be with us and helping to provide a solution. So.
Man, Darren, you made transitions in your life that some won't do, right? So, to those corporate professionals listening, considering that mission pivot, what's one practical thing you would encourage them to test first before they make that leap?
Well, I think it does take some time and prayer of your own, and then I think you really need to bring those who are closest to you, your wife, even your kids to some degree, depending on what ages they are, and bring them around you a bit, and making sure that they understand the path and your why on what you're doing was important. And so, I think I told you that, we made a pivot at the end of 2018 going into 2019. And but that discussion of that, I mean, some of my close friends and people that were around me, accountability kind of people, they knew well before 2018 that I felt like this move needed to come at some point. And, walking me through either knowing other people who walked through it was important. Kind of processing what is the outcome. Okay, if you're going to do this, what is the outcome by making this change? What changes in the outcomes that you would expect to happen for your life, and then also for this ministry that we were working in. That was some of the pre-work that I think went into it, and then just of course your own security, which my wife wanted some assurance of our path forward, and are we going to be able to operate at this different income level and different things like that. And so, there was some work around that, making sure that we, no, it probably, not that we were ever thinking about it, but it probably permanently erased any thought of, oh, let's have another house down in the warm climate somewhere, for the winter in retirement. That, those things were probably off the table. And we had those discussions. If we make this change, it doesn't mean that, we're going to be considering these kinds of things, into our future of maybe retirement or whatever that's called, if there is such a thing. I don't know if there is right now. um,
Oh man,
uh,
I can agree.
but anyway, that I think a lot of that kind of discussion, making sure that we're all solid about the reality of what you're talking about, and then from there, that outcome. What do I want? Why am I doing this in the first place? The whole idea behind that was, the conversation with my wife and I was, if we don't do something different, when we can't do it anymore, this ministry is going to fade away. And so, at some point we've put 20 collective, maybe 30 collective, it is 30 collective years into a ministry. And was all that worth it if we're just going to let it die because we didn't do anything about it? And so
Yeah.
it became that the purpose of leaving was to try and create a succession plan for the ministry, that it would be not dependent on her and I, financially and or resource wise, to be able to move forward. And so, that 2019 January set this course of a plan that I was hoping it would be 6 total years, to be able to find my successor, her successor, and have options about how that goes in the future about our participation, so that but that the ministry would continue without us. So that's what we did, and
I love that.
I concluded being the executive director in December 2024. There's a team in place that's running the ministry day to day. I'm the president of the board still. Don't have an exit plan on that, but I am starting to build now as a phase 3 to everything. The phase 3 is building out the ministry's board. Kind of having a little bit more of a formal, even where members are kind of prepped and on the sidelines, maybe starting to become advisors, before full board members. Maybe building it out so it maybe covers better the region of Kentucky, so that we have good input from all areas. So I'm starting to work on those kind of things for the board. So.
That's so good. One thing I heard, and you can probably tell me if I'm right or wrong
Mhm.
here. Someone that was a leader that I was talking to one time, and he says a faith-led business will teach you more than hustle ever will. And I love that so much. And really, when I sit here just thinking about what you did, this is a faith-led business, right?
Mhm.
Like this is you truly knowing that there was a calling bigger than you, and you took that leap of faith. And here we are, as you mentioned. Now you're really putting people in place and finding out all these different things. Do you agree that a faith-led business will teach you more than hustle ever will?
Yeah, I think because there's more wisdom that comes from a faith-led business than just pure hustle. Pure hustle tends to make it about you. And one of the things I would say the faith-led side of things really got me to understand was, it's not about you. It's about the ministry. It's about what the ministry is doing, but it's not about you. And I think, the course of those 6 years, I cannot tell you how many people said, oh, this must be really hard for you. Oh, this has got to be really difficult for you to be making this transition. And I'm like, it's really not, because it's not about me. I'm actually getting joy from it, because as I watch, God bring Brian, my successor, into my life, and how that happened, and the richness of that, and how certain things fell into place as a part of what we were doing, and looking back on, that it was probably very much, and God was favoring a transition kind of a thing, because he certainly brought some key things to happen through the 6 years, and my peace was high, because I was able to just have some joy in watching, Brian step in and start to take over, and things that it seemed to be even flourishing, and more opportunities to serve, more opportunities of connections, and actually humbly realizing that Brian is better at some things than I am. And Brian's a former and current pastor as a part of what he does. And my call was to start up something from kind of nothing and get it going and get it smooth operating. And his call is to really get to the hearts of people and churches much better than I can. And he's better at it, and there's nothing wrong with understanding that your season, you just did your best season for this ministry. And hopefully leading the board is my next best season, and more of my skill set, that I can do a better job of leading that side of things for Brian to be even more successful. So it's not about you. That's the key.
So good. So good. Yeah, it's not about us. That is so true. It's not about us. For those wanting to support the Orphan Care Alliance financially through volunteering or advocacy, where do they begin?
Well, I mean, the website is the best place. There's places to onboard, into these different areas or inquire or learn. And that's, www.orphancarealliance.org. That's where it's at. I mean, there's places to give. There's places to say, hey, I want to be a life coach. There's places to, get into the system of doing those things all right there online. If you want to adopt, there's an application if there's financial support required. But it's all starts there. I mean, we're of course on Facebook and Instagram as well. But the website is the best place to find the first connection points with us. And of course, it lists our staff and our why and all that on there so that you can really see who we are. So
I'll leave you this last question as we wrap this up. Your adopted son, Andrew, is now 22.
Yep.
What does seeing his life today teach you about long-term investment in children?
Well, I mean, I think it's worth it. Number one, I mean, it's sort of like, the whole, some people will come in and go, hey, how much impact are you really making? And it's like, well, overall, the world's evil and kids continue to come into the system, but I made a difference in this one. I think it's that kind of thing, but it's worth it. I mean, it's worth it in seeing how he's grown, whereas, how his self-confidence and self-worth has gone from, feeling near zero to being a great young man. And it's seeing him, mature into things and knowing right and wrong. It's seeing him, like none of us, it's seeing him making a path at a godly life and trying to make the right choices. And just, there's the times when he's like, at this age, he's kind of like, I understand why you told me that 5 years ago, and I thought it was stupid, but I get it now. I mean, those are moments that he wouldn't have had, if people wouldn't have invested in him, those kinds of things. So it's definitely been worth it. And I think, I don't know. I mean, it's, I don't know that you can really describe the feeling, but I mean, there's a feeling of accomplishment, satisfaction, and maybe just appreciation for the journey. It's also wonderful for me to watch him with my daughter, who is an only child, and for them to go do things together, him and his girlfriend and her husband to be able to go do things and enjoy life together. There's just a satisfaction there for me to see that for him and for his life. So
I love it. I used to say when I was younger, and this is quoted in some magazine, but if I can just help one person before I die, I left the world a better place. Mm-hmm. Darren, you left the world a better place by helping that one individual, and you've helped multiple, but really that one child that gets to see now life very differently than so many others. We talked about 500,000 kids in the foster care system, and statistically, not a lot of them, big percentage doesn't really cross that line to see success. Darren, you have been a part of somebody's success in their life. So we thank you so much for the work that you do and the organization continues to do. It's been a pleasure for you just giving us this time this morning to have this conversation and enlighten people what it actually looks like on the other side, because you've been one to adopt yourself. So we thank you for the conversation. Okay. We hope that you guys are still watching. Make sure you guys do like, subscribe, comment. Check out the website. Figure out how you can also be more involved when it comes to the foster system and to just helping kids really flourish through their lives when the odds are against them. Dan, we thank you. My name's Efrain. This is the Heart and Hustle Podcast. We'll catch you in the next one. Laters.